You forced my hand. So be it.
Hello ballers and welcome to your Arcane guide for patch 7.2.5 and onwards. Yes indeed, this is going to be an interesting one. Most of us in the Mage community, as you know my Mage is my main character, actually expected Arcane to be the dominant spec in Tomb with early numbers. But as always, and I always stress this, anything could change. And currently it is looking like one of the weakest, if not straight up the weakest, honestly. Fire has a place, Frost has its overall place, and we're looking at Frost shortly, but Arcane seems to have been left in the dust, and you'll probably find out why in this video. So hopefully I can educate you on the basics of Arcane to get you started, and I'll work very hard not to start blabbering on about Sims and stuff like that. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so what is Arcane all about? Well, if you've played Arcane in the past or you're a returning player, you probably remember stacking Mastery until the end of days so you could just spam. We don't really do that anymore. It's changed quite a little bit. But what does that Mastery do? Because we're going to have to talk about it because I'm sure a lot of people have these preconceptions. It increases your mana regen rate and your maximum mana by 25% for my character. Arcane charges increase the damage of affected spells by an additional 12.54%. Good. So that Mastery is giving us more mana, bigger mana pool, more damage. Sounds awesome, right? Turns out it's not, and actually they run the very balanced stats based on how your Arcane Mage is currently playing, which is the advice I'm going to give you. But what I will say as a basic level, if you're just getting into Arcane, getting some Mastery early on is a really good idea, because running out of mana and being trapped with like no evocation, which gives us all our mana back, yeah, it's only a 1.5 minute cooldown, but not being able to do this and being like, okay, I'm now, this really sucks, is a bad way to be. So in the early days, you want to get some Mastery just to prevent that happening. But what you will find once you get better at what we're going to call the burn phase and the conserve phase is that you might find yourself, you stack Mastery just with too much mana and your spells just aren't hitting hard enough. So maybe then you started getting more haste, right? But then you found that you were just burning through it too quickly and the spells weren't hitting hard enough. What you want to find is that nice balance that's ideal for your character and maybe the legendaries you've got equipped, which allow you to do a solid burn phase, which we'll talk about, don't worry, and a conserve phase, really nicely, easily managed. And then you're going to look at things like crit and versatility just to buff your damage. I'm truly telling you right now that if anybody goes, you always take this as an Arcane Mage, or this is the focus, they're full of shit. They're absolutely full of shit. You can take it from me. I did the numbers myself, and big shouts to the All Time crew who definitely back that up, because when I sim my character changing one character, all my stats get switched around. You can actually work it on feel, though. Once you're confident in your burn and conserve phases, you can work it on feels like, I think I've got a little bit too much haste, or I don't have enough haste, or I've got too much Mastery, it's just regenning too quick, and this isn't working out for me, because I'm like overflowing, and I'm missing out on evocations, which would totally regen all this mana. I could get more damage out. You can work it on feel. Anyway, let's talk about it, because I talked about Arcane charges there for the new players. So Arcane works on this system. We have Arcane Blast, and every time we fire off an Arcane Blast, we gain an Arcane charge. You can see these down here, right? Yeah. So let's read what that does, because it's important. It's important. It blasts the target. Damage is increased by 72% per Arcane charge, right? So Arcane charge, every one you get boosts your damage of your Arcane spells, right? But also makes them way more expensive. way more expensive. So if I dump these and have 0 charges now, right? Yes, this is how I track my Arcane charges. No, I don't have a problem with it. Just saying. You can see that cost me nothing. Then we get the slightly more expensive one, but still didn't cost a lot. Then that's a little bit more expensive, not regenerating. Then boom, once you have 4, really expensive. Really expensive, right? But we're doing maximum damage at this point. This is where your Arcane Missiles come in. You'll see these procs. You see I have 3 of them. Arcane Missiles doesn't cost anything mana-wise. Really good, right? Also benefits from Arcane charges. So what we can do is use the slow build-up phase. Like I have a charge now. I'm not going to spend this Arcane Missiles. It's going to be weak, and I can bank 3 of them. So what I'm doing is hoping to proc some. I've got 2. And then I go into 4. Now I can use my Arcane Missiles, and it allows my mana to regenerate while I'm firing it off. Arcane Missiles is very well designed. I thought I had Slipstream then. Lol. It's very well designed to buy you time. That's why it's channeled. So your mana has time to regenerate. And you can see the way I'm rebuilding my mana doing this. That's what you're looking to do. Obviously, once you have 4 charges and you're in what we call the conserve phase, which is basically preparing for the next burn phase. So just understand that conserve phase is preparing for the next burn phase. then what we want to do is make sure we go into a burn phase with good mana. So having like no big damage buffs, which we do in the burn phase, and just spamming away your mana is a really bad idea. And if you're doing that successfully and still gaining good mana, there's a high chance you probably have too much mastery. What we want to do is use our other spell, which is Arcane Barrage, which just dumps all our arcane charges, but does maximum damage, okay? So damage is increased by 72% per arcane charge. That's Blizzard's way of saying, use this at 4 stacks, right? Use this at 4 stacks, and this is what you want to do. And this will get rid of all your arcane charges, so you can go back to using the cheaper spells. Via weaving this in, like building up arcane missiles charges, getting to 4 stacks, using the arcane missiles to dump them around, we can make choices like, do I want to fire off another arcane blast now? Again, how much mastery do I have? I can get away with this, you might think. And then, oh, I didn't get a proc? Okay. So really top-end arcane play is about deciding when and where you can risk spending that extra mana, how much mana exactly do you need for the burn phase, etc, etc. That's where that play comes from. Don't worry about it too much right now, just understand that this conserve phase is trying to keep your mana, not maximum, because that's wasting mana regen, but, you know, 90%-ish, 85%-ish, you're pretty good. What is the burn phase? Well, you've probably seen some crazy arcane pulls. The burn phase is when we use our arcane power. Arcane power. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. For 15 seconds, you deal 60% more spell damage. Yes, it hurts the face. And your spells cost 60% less mana. What does that mean? It means we can burn Arcane Blast, the really expensive ones, without going super quick. It's very, very good. This spec is super front-loaded. It's put into this is why they call it the burn phase. A huge proportion of your damage is done in these burn phases that only last like 15-20 seconds, right? They just absolutely hammer it. And during the burn phase, we're going to be popping as many cooldowns as we can. We're going to see that reflected in the talents. And then spamming away our mana to the point where we're like running dry, right? Think of it like, and then you kind of fizzle out. And then we use Evocation to bring our mana back, go back into the conserve phase, and prepare for our next arcane power. So we have like these like peaks and troughs of mega damage, right? So some of the spells to be aware of are Marker Aluneth. Creates a rune around the target, inflicting huge damage over 6 seconds to all enemies, right? And then it detonates. So it's an arcane bomb, essentially, for arcane damage equal to 20% of your maximum mana. Again, this works along the idea that you have decent preparation, right? It's 20% of your maximum mana. This is why you'll see talents like, well, we'll talk about them in a second, why having just a generally higher mana pool benefits you in some way. We also have Presence of Mind, a 1 minute cooldown, cause your next 2 arcane blasts to be instant cast. Very, very nice when we're in the burn phases to be able to instantly, because we only have this 15-second window of arcane power, right? To instantly fire off 2 very heavy arcane blasts. Makes arcane power more worthwhile. Other than that, Evocation I want you to be aware of. It's only a 1.5 minute cooldown, and you can regen all your mana there, so you're nice and safe. And of course, I mean, I have to mention it now. Arcane Explosion! So Arcane AoE is absolutely obscene, right? Absolutely obscene, and it heavily revolves around pressing one button over and over, and is generally considered to be a meme in the community, if I'm being honest with you, because of how silly it is just to run in and do that. So let's talk about the talents, and the talents should make more sense why we choose them, based on what you've just heard. Arcane Familiar, the most boring of the lot. A 10-second cooldown, but really it's just permanent. It lasts 1 hour. You summon a little pet. He does nothing. But what it does do is increase your maximum mana by 10%. Think about what we just talked about. And that's it. It's so boring. It's so boring. And it also disappears all the fucking time. God damn it, Blizzard. Which means you have to be dead sure you have it. Like, people have mega notifications if they use Arcane Familiar. Luckily, in the recent patch, it tends to be the weakest. Words of Power! Words of Power. It grants 1% increased chance to trigger arcane missiles per 20% of your mana you have unspent. Sounds good on paper, but our mana's going to be up and down, and honestly, arcane missiles procs plenty. It really does, so it loses its benefit. You might as well buff the shit out of the arcane missiles. It's one of those specs, honestly. If you're playing it correctly, then the benefits really start to show. A really bad arcane mage will just span all his mana away. Generally, you find this in leveling dungeons, is arcane mages who just go, lol, arcane blast, and then they run themselves dry even after evocation and can't do anything. So they're like 2-minute mages. Essentially, they're just 2-minute mages. But a good mage will be totally fine on mana throughout the fight, and it takes a little bit of practice, but you'll get there. At level 30, a lot of cases, if it's general movement, Slipstream is just amazing. So Slipstream allows us to cast Arcane Missiles and Evocation while moving, okay? Which is really, really cool. So if we show it off here, if I take Slipstream, so I need to Evocate, right? I've just done my burn phase. I'm spent. I've got nothing left that I can Evocate on the move. Ah, really good. Feels good, man. Feels good getting that Evocation out there. Or if I have to move because this guy's going to be a bomb or it's Maiden or something like that, and I've just changed color, yeah? So I'm yellow right now. I need to go to green. I can move over really, really easily using Slipstream without losing a single drop of DPS. Obviously, big shout-outs to Shimmer. Like, I still take Shimmer, and as most of my mage friends will agree with me, once you've got used to playing with Shimmer, it's so hard to go back. It's so hard to go back. Just to be chilling and casting, it's like, oh, I've got to move. And I moved, and I'm still casting and doing full DPS. And its recharge rate is super small. So it's one of those you'll get used to. I mean, it's like full-time. I mean, I've got to say here, the Arcane Mage followers are very avid. Full power to you, full power to you. But I'm not, like, swayed either way. I don't really care. So I'm not favor or fanboying one spec or the other. But then generally they go for Slipstream. But Shimmer has its place in my heart, and I love it. As I told you earlier, Arcane is very front-loaded. You're doing this huge burn phase, which means your de facto choice is Rune of Power, and it shouldn't really need too much explaining. You place a Rune of Power on the ground for 10 seconds, which increases your spell damage by 40%, right? But just putting big dick Arcane Power, burn. Rune of Power makes total sense. It makes absolute sense why you would take that. Mirror Images doesn't really benefit from what we're doing, neither does Incanter's Flow, because Incanter's Flow is just spread out damage. We're not doing that, right? At level 60, you get a couple of choices here, which is nice to see, honestly. Resonance. Arcane Barrage deals 25% increased damage per target hit. So Arcane Barrage, which you might have forgotten, but Arcane Barrage is our dump spell, actually cleaves targets. Really quite cool. So now we can buff that. So if we're doing lots and lots of cleave, what we could do is spec into Resonance. So cool in dungeons and some raid bosses even, if you're going to be doing a lot of cleaving. And deal just increased damage to them, okay? That's a simple idea. So obviously prioritize your Arcane Barrage more than when you're trying to hold it for the last possible second, which is what you'll be doing in normal conserve phase. Alternatively, you can take Charged Up. Immediately grants 4 arcane charges. Tremendous at the pull. So if you're going raw single target, yeah, you can do your pull and you can just instantly, like, go straight to 4 arcane charges. Because the problem with the arcane pull, as you can probably guess at this point, is that you need the time to actually cast the Arcane Blast to get up to 4 charges. So everyone else is nuking with full Bloodlust and cooldowns, and you're like, alright, I'm almost ready. Okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to go. Hold on, I'm still setting some stuff up. Okay, now we're good to go. Now we're good to go, right? That's the way Arcane kind of works, unfortunately. So you can actually skip that with Charged Up and go straight into the big nuke, which is very, very cool. Supernova's great if you've got to do some mega burst, but in general raid encounters, not particularly. I mean, if they're really low health enemies that you're trying to burst out of the way before anyone else gets to kill them and wreck Elishaman's days, yeah, then maybe we'll take Supernova. Chrono Shift, Ring of Frost, or Ice World, take whatever you want. Unfortunately, this is where it gets a little dull, sadly, and this is where Arcane, for my opinion, needs some attention, but again, I'm leaking into endgame stuff here. You pretty much have one choice here, which is Erosion. Your attacks erode the attack. It's just your attacks, right? Just dealing damage, increasing all damage that target takes from your spells by 1%, stacking 8 times. It's just a flat 8% damage buff. After 3 seconds of not taking damage from your spells, which, when does that ever happen? Very, very... Some people seem to think 3 seconds is a long time. It's really not. It's really not. Like, you'll get a lot out in 3 seconds. And this effect decreases by 1% every 1 second. So you just get this flat damage buff from everything you're doing. It's just straight up better. Having 8% more damage stacked on all tops of the other damage we're doing, it's pretty important. Also, something to bear in mind for your pull before you, is that you want to get your erosions. Like, you see this little pink thing? This is what it is. But I want you to note this. Watch, it's at 3. Arcane Missiles. Beep, 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 beep. Yeah? See that? Your Arcane Missiles do count for each of the hits that it does. So, unfortunately, even Nether Tempest, which is kind of like Arcane's Living Bomb, Frost Bomb type effect, is just pretty useless in comparison to having just a flat 8% damage buff. Like, it's just not even comparison. So this tree needs looking at, but Erosion's where you're going. Similarly with level 100, unfortunately. Overpowered. Arcane Power now increases damage by 60%. Yeah, which is way worth. And reduces the mana cost by 60%. What is this spec all about? Overpowered just makes it that much better, which is really sad because Temporal Flux, Arcane's Blast, cast time is reduced by 5% for each Arcane charge. If you have a ludicrously high Mastery, maybe? I mean, the old one used to be better, that gave you like the stacking haste buff. I forget the name of it right now, but that was way more interesting. Arcane Orb is a really cool spell, and it fucking hurts my soul that it's just not that good. It launches an Arcane Orb forward from your position, traveling up to 40 yards, dealing big arcane damage to enemies it hits and passes through. So you'll see a lot of people try and take this in dungeons, because it makes sense. It's supposed to be the dungeon talent. You get to fire this off, it hits targets, it gives you arcane charges. You can see I got 2 there. It looks cool. You get to like instantly pop up to 4. As if 4 targets, you'll just instantly pop back to 4 charges, meaning you can resonance more. It all makes sense. But you're just missing out on too much from Overpowered. It's just as simple as that. It really is as simple as that. You're just missing out on too much benefit from having a mega arcane power every minute and a half. And that's the unfortunate truth of it. That's the unfortunate truth of it. So that's how the talents are chosen. That's the thought process you should go through in choosing yours and how you should choose your stats. Let's have a little extra look at the gameplay, shall we? So gameplay-wise, a big part of this is going to be this burn phase. So how do we set up for it? Well, it becomes kind of obvious when you think about how your spells work. Arcane power only lasts 15 seconds, right? So we don't want to be casting any mega spells that take a long time while we're doing arcane power. We want to cast as many of our most powerful spells as possible. That's the general idea. So when we're opening, what you're going to do if you don't take charged up is get yourself up to 4 stacks, right? Get yourself all nice and ready. I have Arcane Orb right now, don't I? Then you're going to throw down your Mark of Aluneth, because we want that detonation to go off during Arcane Power. So a Mark of Aluneth, then we want a Rune of Power it up. Then we're going to go into the Arcane Power, right? So we have maximum benefit from here, and we're going to spam it and spam it and spam it. Now, we don't want to hit full mana like we did there. What we want to do is just spam, spam, spam as much in, use our Presence of Mind to get more charges out there. And then when our Arcane Power's gone, get our next Rune of Power going. And basically, we're just trying to dump all our mana at this point. This is our burn phase. We're going to be evocating at the end of this, so it really doesn't matter. If we do get missiles procs along the way, we want to make use of them, right? So now we're room. Now we're going to evocate, bring ourselves back to full, and then go back into our usual phase, right? We're going to go back to our conserve phase. We're chilling. We're watching. And this will really depend on your stats, is how you play this. Right, so I've got a missiles charge, cool, going to dump it. Then I'm going to arcane barrage it, right? Now I've got a missiles proc going into the next one. I could have got another arcane blast out there. And this is the thought process you're going through. It's like, oh, okay, I know on this character, I'm literally wearing my frost gear right now, so my decision's a little wonky compared to my arcane. Is decide what to do with it. And then you get this weird period where you have Rune of Power, you do have Mark of Aluneth, and you have Presence of Mind come back. So you can decide what to do there. Are you preparing? What do you need for the next Arcane Power? Will you get it back in time, right? Because Arcane Power is a minute and a half. Mark of Aluneth is a minute. Lining everything up to get the absolute best possible out of there. That's what you're aiming to do. When it comes to AoE, the unfortunate truth of the matter is sure you can buff yourself, but for the most part, if you're going to be AoEing like 4 targets or so like that, you're coming up to Arcane Explosion, y'all. Arcane Explosion. Now, depending on how conserved you want to play it, this is always the thought process while you're doing your Arcane Mage, right? How conserved do I want to play during this period? Do I have a drink period, like you might do in Mythic Plus, right? Where I can get my mana back? How long till my evocation? Do I have set bonuses that affect it? Will affect how you play. Do you want to do some Arcane Explosion and then Arcane Barrage it out for the cleave because you've taken Resonance, for example? So that's really helpful. Do you want to squeeze another Arcane Explosion out? Entirely down to you. The Arcane Mage comes down to how your character is set up for the most part. Just understand the basics, and everything else will fall into place. And that's the advice I want to leave you with as we come out of the basic guide of this, is figure out how your Arcane Mage plays out. Which Legos do you get? Do you have something cool like a Mystic Kill, or do you not? Do you have other things you want to do? Do you run too much? Maybe you need more mastery. All these things figure out together and make it total sense. All right, guys? My conclusion to the Arcane Mage is simple. It's not looking the best right now, but one, it's really fun. It's one of the funnest versions of Arcane we've seen in a long time. It's one of the reasons I chose the Mage. If I had to go Arcane, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I really wouldn't. If Arcane was suddenly the best, I'm totally fine with doing that. And I think it gets a little undeserved. It's got a big stigma attached to it due to how simple and mind-numbing it has been in the past. But it's not there anymore. It's different now, and it pays off. some add-ons I'd recommend for you. I'm fine with the add-ons I use, which is like tell me when. You can use weak auras if you want. A lot of Arcane mages, especially early days, benefit from doing something which you can do with weak auras and stuff, which is tracking like the percentage of mana and looking at it that way to see where they're getting the most benefit and getting used to exact numbers. If that's something that really helps you rather than visually assessing it, I recommend you look into individual add-ons for something like that. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.